Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Universal Journeys. It's been a while.
Yes,
It's been a minute, but it's been a great minute, and now we are back and refreshed and ready to go. Brenda, my dear, would you like to read the show's mission statement?
absolutely. Follow your heart, for only you know which soul path is right for you. Universal Journeys is about redefining ourselves to match the soul's purpose by illuminating the threads which intertwine creatively, spiritually, and identity. These threads encourage, empower, and enlighten us on our own respective journeys.
Beautiful. Well, speaking of journeys, Brenda, what have you been up to and how have you been?
Oh, I've been up to a lot, and I've been well. That's kind of a cool thing. I just came back from a week, almost a week in Traverse City, and Friday and Saturday was watching the international fireworks competition, and oh my gosh, that was just totally awesome. Fireworks, normal fireworks, are never going to be the same.
I saw some of the pictures that you shared. They were really, really awesome. Was it
Yeah.
also like kind of like a camping extravaganza thing too? Like, did you do camping?
Yeah, what we did is we went and we camped at the Traverse City State Park there, and it's called
Oh.
Keith J. Charters
Oh, okay.
State Park. It was right off of 31.
I
So it
do
was
love Traverse City. I could live in Traverse City.
well, it's funny because you think of for me, you think of you Traverse City. Traverse City doesn't seem to be that big when you're looking at the map. You're not thinking that it's again because you're looking. I mean, I'm comparing it to Alpena, to Tawas, to any of those around the area. But Traverse City has really grown since the
Hmm.
last time that I've been there, and it's just totally amazing, amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever we go there, we're always kind of amazed by like the nightlife that's there too. Like it has a pretty thriving nightlife.
I can see that. I can see that,
Well, I mean,
depending
if
where
I'm
you
willing to
go.
stay up past 10 p.m., which I rarely do these days, but
I know it's funny how when you get older, you go to bed earlier.
no, I'm just like at this point, I'm just like, do I want to go out? Do I just want to? I don't know. So for me, I've been I mean, school has started for me, so I've been doing that. I've been doing a lot of gardening over the past few weeks, canning. I've been slowly getting back into writing again, so I feel like I've kind of found a balance because before, like during the summer, like the first half of the summer, I checked out. Like I was like, I am retreating to the garden and just living out there as a little nymph.
Oh, I'm telling you what, I haven't been out in my garden enough. It's because I've been so busy doing other things, and you know, but yeah, it's just next year. I always say next year, but hopefully next year, will be much better. And I'm trying to again settle into retirement here. I mean, I can't even imagine when I first retired, it was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I lost my purpose. I lost all this stuff, and now it's like I can't even imagine when I did work how
Now you're
how I
finding
did all
new
this.
ways to busy yourself.
I
And
am, and I'm joining them. And I don't have to worry about making people happy or listen to people gripe or whatever, and have to, listen to bosses say you got to do this, you got to do that. Oh, you did that wrong. You did, but I'm loving it. I really am.
I love that. Well, and the thing is, like, you are also the person, I know you're not the type to, like, settle. Like, you like to stay busy, you like to stay engaged,
I do.
and now that you have time to do that more, it probably feels more fulfilling.
It does. It does. And again, it's finding another purpose, and I found my purpose with doing things with the VA and for
Mhm,
other veterans and stuff like that. So that's helped out. And I'm not just doing one, I'm doing a couple different things. One for women's health, and then the other one's for helping all the veterans
mhm,
with the advocacy group. So, and
mhm.
that's been pretty awesome so far. Hope to do a little bit more, to do some more traveling, and that's my goal.
Mm,
Do it
I'm
when I
so
want to
proud
do
of you.
it. Thanks.
And it's on your terms too,
And
which is important, right?
absolutely freedom.
So today's topic, speaking of I think this kind of could be connected to it in some way, but we wanted to talk about being a harmonizer.
Hmm. And
And being a like we've reflected on this I think a lot over the years because early on when we first met each other, I think we really connected over realizing that we are both very harmonizy people.
hmm hmm we are.
Sometimes to our detriment. But I also think that it's just part of who we are. So Brenda, what does it mean to be a harmonizer in your opinion?
For me, being a harmonizer was trying to balance, some negativity and positive and stuff like that, is to balance that. So you're going to get a little bit of both, but is to balance it. I don't like chaos. I'm one of those individuals, and that's part of being a harmonizer. You want to harmonize so everyone feels good and productive and things like that. But um that's what a harmonizer is. And there's a lot of times you can't.
Hmm.
And that's where things come into, like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And
Yeah.
it messes you up mentally too, because you take on that responsibility to be that harmonizer, and you can't, and it's crazy. Then your like brain goes all wacky, and
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we'll be talking about the mental health impact in a bit because I think that it has so many mental health impacts that I know I've not learned to unpack until recently in therapy. And some of the realizations have been a little interesting, but also a little not surprising for me. But so for me, being a harmonizer is very similar. It's like balancing like the positive and the negative. But also, I've kind of viewed being a harmonizer as being like that diffusing force where I know I'm able to go into a
Mhm.
situation with conflict and be like, let's breathe, everybody. Let's do some feng shui. Let's let's find the meditative moment.
Right,
And
right.
sometimes it works. Most of the time it works. Other times it does not. But usually, like it does. I've noticed help a situation a little bit by kind of like smoothing out the edges and just showing that, like, hey, there is a third option beyond the
Mm.
two extremes that we're used to experiencing, right?
Well, I can tell you that the last 8 years has been probably the hardest 8 years to harmonize, that I've experienced in my lifetime.
Mm,
And that's because everyone is either on way out here or way out here. And when you try to bring it, it's like, look, guys, we have a common denominator here, and in the way that you're looking at things and the way that the others is the same thing, but you're just saying it a little bit differently. And then I get accused of being on this side or that side. And so again, that's part of that chaos.
hmm.
The chaos aspect of it is hard. It's hard. And again, it's hard. you
Yeah.
can't you can't balance it. People don't want to hear it.
Well, so let's give, and it is true, some people definitely get uncomfortable with it and they don't want to hear it at all. I guess if we were to like provide some examples for everyone, because like maybe people are listening to this and they're thinking like, okay, well, like I kind of get what it is, but maybe I need some examples to kind of cement it, right? So what does it, well, I guess how have you been a harmonizer? Like, what are some examples? Do you want me to note mine first really quickly? Because
Yeah.
I have one that I thought of the other day.
Okay.
So for me, being a harmonizer usually happens in chaotic situations where people are disagreeing, right?
Yes.
And I kind of use like my inner teacher to be like that harmonizer, where like if I see something taking place, I like to go in and try to transform it into an educational moment,
Mhm.
because sometimes reorienting things and turning it into an educational moment has the possibility of diffusing the situation, thus leading to harmony. But I've had to learn the hard way that that's not always the route to take. Like, I'll
Mhm.
give you an example. And of course, it always has something to do with politics, right?
Right.
So, like, I entered a situation where I went in and I tried to diffuse a situation through the harmonizing, and it went awry. It did not go like I had planned. So, the political spectrum that I usually connect with were upset because they thought that I was compromising too much at my own expense.
Mhm.
Whereas the other side of the spectrum thought that I was like talking down to them. So I was just like, did I just make things worse by trying to be a harmonizer?
I I totally understand because that's where I was going with this. Is like I was, yeah, and it's just it's very very hard to do. I mean, before it wasn't that hard because you were dealing with people at work or whatever, and
Hmm.
then you could find a common denominator, and that's really what it is finding a common denominator which will be suffice for both sides.
Yeah.
Okay. However, with the last 8 years, that's not been the case because, when you try to go to that middle ground, and that's where harmonizers are, they're the middle ground. Okay.
Hmm.
So they can
Yeah.
see both sides. And the harmonizer is like, okay, well, you see this person, this side's point and this side's point, but yet they're saying the same thing, and
Hmm.
then you try to explain that to this or that to that, and you get accused that, well, you're this or you're that, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not either.
Yeah.
I'm neither. I see
It's
what's going on both sides.
so interestingly for me, it has come off as me sabotaging myself, if that makes sense. Because
Yeah.
I mean, I'm LGBTQ plus. It's no surprise that I am rather liberal, right?
Mhm.
But like in those instances where I have tried to be the harmonizer, I've really done it at my own expense, because usually it's in conversations where I'm like having to illustrate for the opposite perspective that, like, hey, I exist, I'm a human
Mhm.
being, and there could be something that threatens that, right? Like, here is, and I've had people get upset at me on my side over being too diplomatic and not
Ah,
enforcing boundaries enough, right?
got it.
Because they've argued, and I definitely understand where this argument comes from, because I feel it now, but like, it should not have to be the responsibility of the individual in that community to have to do the educating, right? So, because again, bandwidth is something to take into consideration.
Hmm.
So now I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I do want to be a harmonizer, but I can do it without compromising myself. Does that make sense?
It does,
And it's
and
hard to do. It's really hard to do,
it is
because
really
I don't
hard.
like seeing people fight.
Right. Well, my what I've had to do the last 8 years is to step back and not even engage in any conversations
Hmm. Yeah.
because you don't want to cause any more havoc or any more chaos or any more whatever.
Hmm.
And that's not good for us. That's not good for the people who step back because we have a
Hmm.
voice. We have a
Yeah,
voice too.
absolutely.
The
Yeah.
harmonizer will keep their own opinions and stuff technically to themselves unless you have a passion.
Yeah.
You have passion.
Hmm.
You have a lot of passion.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, like, I think us keeping ourselves silent does sabotage ourselves, but it also shows the privilege and safety we have, in order to be like, I have the luxury of stepping out of the ring when I need to.
Mhm.
And I had somebody illustrate to me once that, like, oh, well, I don't have that luxury. but, and that was very illuminating for me. I was just like, wow, like, that's a good point. Like, I have the safety and luxury to kind of
Right.
step aside and mentally recoup, but there are other people who may not have that ability or,
Mhm.
that vantage point, right?
Yep.
So it really, I think it made me realize that my need to be a harmonizer kind of conflicts with my want to be an activist and my passion for that. Like you were saying passions, right? Like I
Yep.
think you and I definitely have a passion for advocacy and for being an
Yeah.
activist, but sometimes that desire to harmonize, which I think comes from a good place. I think it does kind of conflict with those.
Mhm.
And part of the journey is finding the balance between that, right? Knowing when to read a room, when it's acceptable to be that harmonizer versus when it's acceptable to be the activisty advocate.
Mhm. It is. It's for us, it's learning to what we can engage in and what we shouldn't engage in.
Hmm.
And that's the tough part is that learning process. And that's why I'm doing a little bit of research, or actually going to be quite a bit of research on assertiveness, because
Mm,
harmonizers are not assertive in a manner of speaking, because we're trying to
right, yeah.
harmonize and balance and make everything good and happy and joyful or whatever you want to call it. But that also takes us back, and we don't we're in the background. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, harmonizers are mostly in the background. In being back there, I know I've thought many, many times, when is it my turn? Why why
Hmm.
why can't my voice be heard? And I love it because you do have assertiveness there, especially with your outlets, with your YouTube channels. I
Yeah.
mean, because you're getting your message out there. Now, in person, that's a little bit different story. I love the fact that you're going out and you're being with my friend, um, Rebecca. So
Oh,
I love her.
Rebecca.
I love her. She's awesome. So, but doing different things like that, and I'm finally, I feel like I'm finally getting to my passion with this, with the veterans, working with the veterans groups and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So that's something that I wanted to do quite a long time ago, and I wasn't able to because guess what? I had to work for a living, you know.
Right.
Now this is a different type of work. For me, it's more enjoyable because we as veterans need advocacy, people to help us. Um,
Absolutely.
so, yeah.
So you're kind of learning a different type of assertiveness through this, right?
Mhm.
It's interesting that you mentioned assertiveness because I think I remember early on, my earliest memory of being a harmonizer was in sixth or seventh grade. I was in band class and we had a substitute teacher a particular day. Her name was Mrs. Kai. I will never forget. And there, like, of course, whenever there was a substitute teacher, the students would just be absolutely terrible. Like, they would just be like, and I would get so overwhelmed when classes were chaotic and there was no control, because I felt like maybe I was going to get in trouble too. Maybe, I was going to get punished for it.
Right.
Trauma, like, we can unpack that later. But I remember the Mrs. Kai tried to enforce, like, everyone to be quiet, and one of the students, like, nearby, like, just started going in on her, like, just insulting her and being rude. And I looked at that student and I was just like, why don't you shut up? So in advocating for her, I thought that I was doing something good. Mrs. Kai looked at me and yelled at me
What?
for even saying anything. And I'm just like, I'm literally trying to, on your behalf, like, show you that, you're not alone in this. That took the wind right out of my sails, Brenda.
I can see how it would. And you do have those occasions and things that happen, and
Hmm.
it's just, I don't know. It's just kind of a crazy thing.
I've
Um,
never forgotten that. I've never forgotten that because I'm wondering, I always have wondered, maybe she misinterpreted why I was saying that. Maybe she thought that I was just trying to egg on a fight, which, if she knew me, I was quite possibly the most quiet, shy student ever. Like, I wouldn't stand up to somebody unless I knew something was wrong, but, it could have been anything. It could have been
Right.
anything.
And that's part of being a harmonizer.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like, okay, I mean, because I was shy in school. And you don't want to upset the apple cart, when you see certain things, and it's just one of those things. I mean, you just stay quiet. But in your
Hmm.
mind, you're saying, why can't I talk about stuff? Why can't I,
Yeah.
start this or suggest this without getting attacked? And so,
Yeah. Like, I would say that, so, like, I think one very important question that we should ask is, how has being a harmonizer impacted or influenced your mental health? And for me, especially because I had so many instances where the wind was taken from my sails, so to speak,
mhm,
um, I very much just kind of like mentally imploded on the inside where I felt overlooked, I felt minimized.
yep,
Um, And even though I had this desire to harmonize, like you were saying, I would just stay quiet because I was afraid that I would be misinterpreted or misrepresented, right?
mm,
And there are instances where I kind of regret that silence too, because like I remember, I'll never forget, like on the school bus, I I saw like somebody get bullied and I didn't do anything because I was afraid of the retaliation, or I was afraid of
mm.
but I do also remember another instance where I did stand up to a bully on somebody else's behalf, and the adult in the room yelled at me for even doing anything. And I was just like, what is going on?
It
Like it's funny because they expect us, well, you need to stand up for yourself and others, but the moment you do so, people are punished for it.
well, that's
Sometimes more
exactly right.
harshly than the bully.
That's exactly right. And that's kind of my point too. Is why is it okay for everyone else to act out and do and be and stuff like that? But the moment that a harmonizer does, between you and I both, I've experienced the same thing. And it's like, how come they can get away with that and I can't? What makes
Right.
me different than them? So I think it's because we've always been a harmonizer to balance things. And then when we do speak out, it's like, oh, wait a minute, you can't do that. It's like you have your position to be a harmonizer and you can't, speak out. Hence why assertive learning to be, assertive, that would be totally different. You're going to
Hmm.
shock someone if you've been a harmonizer all your life and all of a sudden you become assertive, um, in a good way, because you don't want to go one way or the other. You don't want to be a bully, but you don't want to be walked all over either. And that's
Hmm.
another thing that harmonizers do. They get walked over on because they want harmony. They want
Hmm.
please. That goes back to pleasing people.
Yeah.
Harmony and being a people pleaser are like one and the same, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the assertiveness. Isn't it wild how uncomfortable people will get once you start asserting yourself?
Absolutely.
Because as harmonizers, people are used to us being diffusing, diplomatic, quiet, and the moment that we choose not to do that,
Allow 'em.
it becomes so uncomfortable for them that they sometimes react in a retaliatory way, or they get very confrontational about it because they're like, what are you, what are you doing? Like, why are you being this way? Like, you're being different. And it's like, well, I'm asserting myself and being,
I,
a
I
stronger
found my,
person as a result.
I found my voice. I found my voice. That's the big thing right there. Is when you become assertive, you find your voice.
Hmm.
Seriously, you don't have to be mean about it. It's just you're being assertive and getting your point across and doing things that you want to do versus things that other people want to do.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So, going back to therapy, so one thing that I learned about my mental health and being a harmonizer, very much connected with that people pleasing thing,
Mm-hmm.
is control. I We're both earth signs. You're a Taurus, I'm a Capricorn.
Yeah.
We like to covertly be in control of a situation.
Yes, we do.
We do. We do. And we do that so because if we feel that sense of safety, that means that we're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I like my therapist really unpacked it for me. She was just like, "Well, Donnie, like you're doing all of these things, you're compromising yourself for all these people because you're a people pleaser and you know that it's going to keep harmony if you just, shut up and just
Go with
be the
flow.
workhorse for everyone else
Yep.
at your own expense."
And
And
true.
when she illustrated that for me, I was like it just I was like, "Wow, I really do
That
that,
light
don't
bulb
I?"
went off up there, didn't it?
Yeah. Like there's a little hamster in this brain that's going around a wheel, just. But like it was very illuminating because then I could start like now that I can recognize it whenever I'm in like situations,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can start to undo it or at least try to pepper in a little assertiveness when I need to.
Yeah.
And the truth is, the first step that I have found toward being more assertive is simply being upfront about how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. That's hard to do, though. That's hard to put.
Oh, it's
Put.
so scary.
Yeah, because that's putting you. That's a vulnerability that you have that you're opening up in divulging to everybody else. So that's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. But so let's say that I am volunteering for something, or maybe at work I have a lot going on and I'm just kind of loading myself up with more responsibility just to harmonize, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am now at least able to be like, hey, I have this, and this on my plate right now. I cannot do this right now.
I just had
So,
to do it.
oh, look at your kitty in the background.
Yeah, that's Gracie. She's my gentle gal.
Look at how glamorous she looks.
I
She's
know.
here to teach us a lesson about assertiveness because
When
she
she
is
wants
asserting
something, oh my
herself.
god, yep, it's like, "Mama, mama, you gotta pet me now, pet me." That's what she does, and she's my gal that's not kinda, but she's gentle, so when she wants something, she'll go, she'll pat me. "Mama,
Oh, so
mama."
she respects boundaries and she's just like, hey,
There you go.
hey, a lesson from a cat.
That's right, that's right. Now my middle cat, Rogie, man, she's like, "Bulgard, poof, give here, come here." Yeah.
That's so funny. But no, yeah, unpacking the mental health portion of it has been really illuminating. Now, for you, how has it impacted or influenced your mental health?
Well, it has really impacted, again, the last 8 years. I've noticed that my mental health has um, been impacted by what's been going on.
Hmm.
And it has not been a good thing. It has taken me into places that I never thought I would go. Um,
Yeah.
and and it's part of stress. It's part of that stress. It's all a part of that stress and anxiety, and it's all a part of the trying to harmonize. Because when you can't harmonize and make sense of things, your anxiety is kind of out of control, and the stress level doesn't help it any, because you're
Hmm.
stressed. You're anxious because you're trying to harmonize and you can't, and then your stress level is up because you're trying to harmonize, and your anxiety is out of control. I mean, it's just like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
So now, thank you again for retiring. That's helped out. I mean, I finally. It does take a year, a year and a half, maybe a year after retirement to settle into something. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than that, but it's just finding your balance, finding a purpose. That was the big thing, is finding a purpose to go forward. Because if you
Hmm.
don't go forward after you retire, if you sit around, guess what? You're not going to last a long time. You got to
Yeah.
keep going. You got to keep yourself busy. You got to do stuff. Got to keep active. But
Interesting.
my mental health really did suffer. It really did. And I'm trying to change that now. Um, because I was a harmonizer for so long. Now I'm asserting myself a little bit differently, and it
Hmm.
seems to be working out and shocking the heck out of people. But you have to do that for your mental health. You have to do that because that way you're balancing and harmonizing within yourself.
So how are you doing it differently now? Like, what was that like factor that shifted it for you?
I got tired of doing what everybody else wanted me to do and not doing anything that I wanted to do. And I got tired of being stepped on and said, "Oh, you got to do this, you got to do this," and like, "Okay, I'll do that.
Mm,
Okay, I'll do that." And putting up boundaries. That's huge. Putting up boundaries. I just had an incident yesterday, and where I was asked if I would take on another role, and I told the individual that I'm sorry, I cannot do it due diligence because I am not going to be able to be available all the time that you every time that you need me, all that, because I'm doing so
hmm.
much other stuff. And
Yeah.
I really don't want to take on that position. I could do it, I mean, I'm qualified to do it, but I just don't want to take on another responsibility. It that gets me back in that chaotic thing. So learning to
Way to
be a little
go.
yeah, learning to be a little assertive like that is like, no. I mean, there was a couple incidences um through last week in Traverse City where I had to like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And voicing your opinion is huge because
Yeah.
that's the only way that the individuals are going to know what you feel, what you think about, how it's going to affect you. It's like, I don't feel comfortable. And that's all I have to say. I don't feel comfortable doing this.
Mm,
So
interesting.
so therefore I am not going to do this.
We could do like a whole episode on boundary setting. Like, I think that
Oh,
would be like I mean, and it's very difficult to get to the point where you're able to articulate that.
mhm,
Now, like I do think that there are instances where like I mean, I feel like friendships like ours, like for years you and I
mhm,
have kind of positively coaxed each other into trying new things, growing in new ways, mentally challenging one another, right?
mhm,
Whereas like there are people though who will challenge you so much and push you so much that it's like throwing you into the deep end of the pool with no floaties,
mhm. And
right?
and as you're saying that, my inside is going, "No."
Because
Because
we've been put in that position so much.
we have. We have.
We've been put in that position so much. So, I mean, this actually transitions into another interesting question to explore. What motivates us to act as harmonizers? Is it your history? Is it trauma? Is it maybe a sense of optimism? I will be honest, for me, trauma, 1000%. Because I mean, I had a family member, my grandmother on my mom's side was very abusive. I do have some good memories with her, but like, I got into the habit of having to diffuse the conflict so much to simply survive day to day that it just kind of became galvanized inside me.
Mhm,
Like, this is
mhm.
always something instinctually that I have to do,
Right.
right?
Part of mine, if not all of it, started out when I was very young, and have always been a people pleaser. And part of being a people pleaser is also harmonizing.
Hmm.
So at a very young age, I learned to be a people pleaser so that I wouldn't get in trouble, or it other people didn't get in trouble. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of that, okay, I'll take on this responsibility, so that, we won't have all this chaos or whatever you want to call it, um, within the family unit or within friend units or whatever. So that's kind of where that's been in unfortunately, and this brought up why I was saying that, this brought up something else, is when you're a harmonizer and you're a people pleaser, guess what? You lose your identity,
Mhm. Yeah.
because then once you identify with an individual, that's your identity. And I've had that with my former husband, being in the military and stuff like that, in being with him. So I harmonized with his, or resonated, either one, um and the identity became his. My identity was with him. So you had
Mhm.
to do things the way that he needed to do and stuff like that. And again, that goes back to people pleasing, it goes back to harmonizing, because you don't want that chaos. And but when that individual or that situation has left, and you're there like, oh right, who am I now?
Mhm. Mhm.
Who really am I? Because I don't have a clue, because all I lived for was for him.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And now that I'm with someone else, um I am trying not to be. I'm with him. I'm going to do whatever that is, because I need to have an identity myself. I went through
Mhm.
many years not having an identity. Who the heck am I? What is
Yeah.
it that I like versus anybody else? So it is like a whole new paradigm that you have going on that you have to figure out.
Wow. No, that's it's so true. I think connecting that to my experience, being a harmonizer at a certain point was something that I used as a form of currency, where like say like I'm in a middle school class or a high school classroom and I was facing a lot of bullying in high school. I would be the harmonizer to almost gain the good graces of the teacher so that the teacher could keep me safe in a
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
But I would do it so much at my own expense that I just would take on other people's qualities. I would invest myself in what other people liked, all at the expense of my own identity, which I would bury and bury and bury until I really didn't acknowledge it anymore. You know, like I know, like in the past, one downside of being a harmonizer is that sometimes people just don't know the real you because you're spending so much time being someone else that you, in a way, almost convince yourself that you are someone else.
Right. I mean, don't
Mm-hmm.
get me wrong. There are individuals who will mimic everything an individual does. They take on everything. I didn't do
Mm-hmm.
that. I took on only certain aspects of it, but enough to know that I didn't have my own identity,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know,
No,
and
I resonate with that too. Yeah.
yeah, and it's about feeling safe. I mean, I didn't think about that part of it until you mentioned it, but it is about feeling safe. It's about, okay, a harmony is about feeling safe. That's amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
I look back, and all the times that I've ever done anything like that, it was about feeling safe.
Mm-hmm.
Who can you
Yeah.
feel safe with? Um, so when you've been by yourself for a while, like I have, and done things on your own, like I have, the last 5 years, you begin to realize who you are. And
Mm-hmm.
there are still times when I do the harmonizing too, but I've learned that you want to bitch and yell and scream at the other person, go right ahead. I'm backing up. I don't need to be a part of that crap, because, that's just chaos to me, and I don't want any more chaos in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I can choose
Right.
to remove myself from those situations and those people.
Yeah, and that's very freeing in a way, right? No,
It
so it's interesting. Going back to what we were talking about regarding safety, I think there is very much. I think we've reached a point now where we are healthy in our harmonizing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like this toxic harmonizing thing, but I kind of had this thought where I didn't realize that there was a bad side of harmonizing until I pieced together, am I helping people feel safe through just mindlessly harmonizing all the time? What
Boy.
message is that sending to different groups of people, right? And when I realized that, like going back to what I was talking about earlier in the episode about like harmonizing at my own expense, like my identity's expense, etc., like I realized how much that was making other people not feel safe around me when they had known the activist Donny, the advocate Donny. Like, what is Donny willing to compromise just to be a harmonizer? You know, and what is he willing to sacrifice at his own expense to be a harmonizer? So like I had to ask myself those questions to be like, okay, like yeah, like I'm really worried about my safety. This is a chaotic situation and I want to harmonize to just make everybody happy. But what other messages is my harmonizing sending?
Mm,
Right?
mm,
And
mm.
when I piece that together again, that's the theme.
But you know something, I just thought about this. Um, Harmonizing and being a diplomat are one and the same,
Mm-hmm.
because you want to be diplomatic of whatever you do and how you do it, and things like that. And technically, it's one and the same.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if you really think about it, you got the safety aspect in there too, okay? But the harmonizing is associated with being a diplomat, because I can be very diplomatic about certain things, and a little bit of harmonizing goes into that thought pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, maybe even more than just a little bit. But being a diplomat is definitely, you got to look at all the sides and everything else, and
Oh, for sure.
come up with a solution that's good for everybody.
Now I've gotten to the point, that was an excellent point, by the way. I've gotten to the point where healthy harmonizing as an educator, I have looked at as just opening the door,
Mhm.
right? Like calming the situation enough for the door to be open, but people have to choose how they walk through it or if they walk through it, right? We
Yep.
don't have control over that.
Right.
And part of my neurosis a long time ago was assuming that I had control over coaxing people over that threshold.
Yep, and I was gonna say control has a lot to do with that. It looks different than people are,
Uh,
like, trying to control, 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 you know what I mean?
control? I don't like I've never liked control. I'm kidding.
But that's exactly what we're trying to do when we're
Hmm.
harmonizing, is to control the situation.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's uncontrollable and you can't. So either you just back up and allow it to come to a
Hmm.
head. And you know the other thing too is that another thing popped in my head is, sometimes when we're trying to harmonize between, the situation or whatever, maybe, just maybe, we are causing the individuals not to learn their lessons by doing so.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that because, again, you have these convenient transitions into our questions, Brenda.
This
So,
happens.
as a harmonizer, what are our greatest weaknesses and challenges, right? And I think that that would be one of them.
The loss of
So yeah, like as harmonizers, like if we are really just focused, like hyper focused on harmonizing in a situation, we will let the bad people kind of just skate on by and flourish without being confronted because of
Mhm.
that need to just smooth over a situation.
Right.
Hmm.
And their
Case in
lessons get
point,
harder too. Yep. Go ahead.
yeah, well, case in point, like that example that I noted at the beginning of the episode where say like I have somebody like being an absolute bigot about a person's identity, right?
Mhm.
and then me just trying to smooth the situation without confronting that hate,
Mhm.
that doesn't do anything for the situation other than just shutting it down right there, right? It's not like turning it into an educational moment by like posing questions and confronting that hate, being like, hey, where does this thought process come from, right? um Additionally, I think being a harmonizer allows like very vampiric people to
Mm,
kind of latch onto us and be like, oh, well, I know they're not going to do anything about it, or I know
mm,
they're gonna look the other way by like just trying to diffuse the situation.
yep.
And those people, like narcissists, they they love harmonizers because they know that a harmonizer is not going to confront them.
Well, and that's the issue. We don't confront
Hmm.
them. We
Yeah.
don't stand up for ourselves. We'll s- and this is what in counseling, it's kind of funny you say that, but in counseling, for me is I could always stand up for other people, but I'll be
Mm,
danged if I could stand up for myself. I
yes.
didn't know how to do that.
It's and I had a similar thought process posed to me by my therapist. I love that we're like delving into like our therapy. So, but it shows, I think, healing in a live setting, right? Because it's
Right,
ongoing.
right, right.
Well, my therapist basically was like, Donnie, how can you expect to be an activist or advocate if you can't simply do that for yourself?
There you go.
Like if you're being a diffuser or harmonizer and at your own expense and bystanders see that, do they really think that your advocacy or activism is going to actually mean anything if you can't do it for yourself?
Bingo.
Oh,
I like it.
that kind of gave me goosebumps.
But I mean, it's true, and again, it goes back to harmonizing, but it also goes back to people pleasing.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's one and the same, and you do get a lot of vampiric, narcissistic individuals in your life because guess what? They can control you. And
Hmm.
you're in doing your harmonizing, you're trying to control the situation. And
Yeah.
that's not
But
what
they circumvent right around it. And they're just like, well, while they're busy controlling the situation, I'm just going to control them.
exactly. And you don't even realize until it's too late. And then it's like, how do I get myself out of this situation?
Well, and at that point, you're in so far, it's like it just kind of becomes a cruel cycle,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And
So
because you resonate with an individual, and it's like, okay, let's get back out of there. You don't want to let go.
another downside to being a harmonizer, another challenge, is that harmonizers want to make a difference. They want to. I think harmonizers, in a way, feel this need to be needed.
Oh, absolutely.
And we do that because we're of course we draw in people who might have issues of their own. They might we sometimes look at people as being projects like that we need to fix. like like we look at people as like houses to flip. Like we're just like we go in there and we're like we're gonna DIY HGTV flip this flip
Yes.
this house. And then we realize that can't do that. We can't do that because it's at our expense. And is our intent genuine as a result, right? Or are we just doing it out of some need to feel needed?
Hmm.
It's such a very complex
Hmm.
thing.
Or even our need to control,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and I have the last, oh, several years, I mean, several years, is I was used to people listening to what I had to say.
Hmm.
Okay. On spiritual aspects and things like that, or giving advice. And in, I would say, with the last couple of years now, it's maddening to me because I have these good ideas, this good advice that I feel is good, anyways, for individuals to help them along their journeys, and they don't want to hear it.
Well, part of the challenge is us accepting that if they're not ready to hear it, then they're not ready to hear it too.
Right. But
Yeah.
that's
I mean, it's
control.
the same with activism and advocacy, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I want to open that educational door and just walk them through it,
Yep.
but they have their own like volition. If they don't do that, that's that they're willfully making that. I do find comfort in knowing that I can extend the olive branch, but if people aren't willing to receive it or walk through that door, that's out of my control, you know.
That's a great lesson.
And it's a hard lesson to learn, and
Oh,
sometimes I forget
yeah.
it. And as people, as chronic people pleasers slash harmonizers, it's something that we are like constantly vigilant about, right?
Mhm.
Because if we don't stay vigilant about it, then we're like we kind of go back to square one.
And we do,
We
and
do.
very that's very true. We do, and it's like, ah, gotta go back.
And then we get mad at ourselves for it. But no, that's I would argue that's kind of why we decided to revive the show, Brenda, because I feel like the conversations we did have for that good year or two, they were an extension of like the just simple, straightforward conversations we would have over coffee
Right.
about self-realization, about spirituality, about like how we connect with other people, about the way we advocate for other people, how we
Mhm.
advocate for ourselves, right? And we can put that information out there, and we do have a platform to do so. But people choose to absorb what they want to absorb, right? If they don't
Yep.
want to absorb it, that's willfully their choice. I don't think that means that we aren't good enough. I don't think that means that we aren't valid. But as people pleasers and as harmonizers, we are conditioned to think that if somebody doesn't receive it, then we're being overlooked, minimized, or erased, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
that was our mode of coping for so long. That was
Mhm.
our mode of being visible, is just being a harmonizer. I feel like this is a therapy session. Brenda, do I
Eh,
need to pay you by the hour?
no, but and this, I mean, it really does have a lot to do with everything that we talked about, with everything, spirituality, with mental health, with self identity, with everything, in paying attention. And all we can really do with our lives to overcome this is to work on ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And to like, if you hit a snag, if you backtrack a little, like if you feel like you're on a good momentum, you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, don't let it stop you.
Yeah, it's okay to do that. It's okay. That's part of the
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
Gives you time
If,
to rethink and stuff like that and make it better the next time.
yeah,
It's okay.
if there's anything you and I have learned from our own trauma and our own therapy, probably is that healing is not linear.
Very true.
It's not. It is
Very
not
true.
linear. But I think that we are taught to expect that it is, when like it's not that. It's not that objective. It's very subjective, right? It can be chaotic, and I know we don't like that because we're two earth signs that love people pleasing and harmonizing. So
Sometimes you have to do what you have to do. Self preservation should be the number one thing in
mhm.
individuals' lives. And also to know that everyone has lessons to learn. And let me give you an example before we wrap it up. I was talking to a gal yesterday in a women's Bible study, and she was saying, we were talking about, lessons or whatever, and she was saying that she always used to want to rush in. It was like rush in to help individuals out, and to make it to where everything would be okay between the two, and so on, so forth. I did
Mhm.
the same thing, but she was going to do this, and she felt and saw, I guess, um, God saying, "Stop! I got this. You don't have to do anything else. Let me do my work."
Mhm.
So, and it's that young lady's um, the one that wasn't told to stop, but the one that was doing the perpetrating, um, it's her lesson to learn, and God is the one that's going to do that.
Yeah.
To me, that
Wow.
was amazing because I've had to learn to back up and allow people to learn their lessons. That's where I was going with that.
Yeah.
It was a great
No,
analogy from yesterday.
well, yeah, and I think that's important because as harmonizers, I think we feel like we're under this obligation to spoon feed to people.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's like what kind of responsibility does that put on us? Right? Like that puts way too much responsibility on us.
Mhm.
And then those individuals end up feeling like, well, that's what we're going to do all the time. So it creates an expectation,
Right. Right.
which then gets extremely exhausting and draining for us, right? Because
Right.
then we're taking all of that energy that we should be saving for ourselves and we're just putting it out there, being like, okay, well, like we need to teach everybody how to walk these paths, like instead of simply opening the door, right? But no, like it's not to say that I don't think harmonizing is always a bad thing. I think there's healthy ways of doing it. I
Mhm.
think part of the journey is um, understanding how to read the room to know when is a good or bad time to be a harmonizer, which transitions us into our final question. If someone believes themselves to be a harmonizer, what advice do we have for them in navigating it?
Number one, I would say rethink and think about you and your mental state. And do you really want to do this? And think about people's lessons that they need to learn right along with the lessons that you need to learn. And maybe the lesson is just to let it be.
Yeah, I would also add one important thing to consider is asking yourself what your motivating factor is behind being a harmonizer,
Perfect.
right? What is motivating you to do it? Are you motivated by trauma, like what we were talking about? Are you motivated by, maybe like witnessing a difficult family history? Are you motivated by a sense of optimism? Are you motivated by a higher power or powers, a
Mm-hmm.
spirituality,
Hmm.
religion? Like,
Hmm.
what is motivating you to be a harmonizer? Are
Hmm.
you motivated by wanting to be an advocate, an activist, wanting to create some sort of social change for groups of people who might not have that power or luxury? Is it all of the above?
That's
If it
right.
is all of the if it is all of the above, how do you partition it off and make it and separate the things and leave enough energy for yourself behind
Right.
to work on you,
That's true.
right? And if heaven forbid you are a control freak like we've been in the past, how do you make peace with that too?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like, how do you navigate through that? Because again, not to do the cliche, like, we hear the cliche, well, if you don't love yourself, how are you going to love somebody else? I don't always necessarily believe that because I know plenty of people who don't love themselves who love somebody else.
Hmm.
But um, when it comes to harmonizing, how do you expect to be the advocate you want to be, to smooth the chaos when you're not advocating for yourself first or smoothing the chaos internally?
Right. Right.
Because really it's just kind of sending a double message. Again, what are the bystanders thinking? It's always an important thing to
Mhm.
consider. If they see you doing your best to be that harmonizer and they're just like, oh, but you're not doing that for yourself, it's pretty obvious when that happens. So I guess in conclusion, worry about you, and
Well,
then you can worry about others.
there you go. And you have to learn. You have to learn when to be an harmonizer and when not to. There are still times when I'll rush in, try to be the savior. There you go. You got the savior complex going on. We
Oh
didn't even
God,
talk about that part of it.
there's an episode idea because that's a whole episode idea.
Yep. So I mean, so that's all those things. But the main thing is to think about it. Stop, think a moment or two. Is it going to be worth your sanity? Um,
Mm,
to get into doing the harmonizing. Think about it first. Who is it benefiting? Is it going to benefit you or is it going to benefit them? I mean, is
yeah,
it your need? Is it your need to be needed? You know?
yeah,
So all of those aspects come into play. And before you step into any situation to try to harmonize it, is it going to be worth your mental health? Is it going to be worth it? Um,
yeah.
so that's the big thing. And
You know,
sometimes what I do is like, I don't care, I'm going in anyways.
and
So
sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to, right? You
no
know,
question.
I think that is the perfect sentiment to end on. Brenda, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I knew it would be. It always is,
It always
right?
is.
But everyone, of course, don't forget to subscribe to Universal Journeys. Click like. You can also listen to Universal Journeys on YouTube Music in podcast form if you would like.
Mhm.
But I guess our final sentiment, Brenda, is our mission statement. What is our motto here?
Follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. God bless.
Much love, everyone. Bye.